All right, cool. Do you want to do our top tens of 1985?
I would love to do a top 10 of 1985. There's some good movies this year.
Why don't you start?
All right. I will start with number 10 is the film I almost picked for you for this podcast. Very similar. Hadn't seen it since high school. Only watched it when I started watching the Best Picture nominees. It's a John Huston film with Jack Nicholson and Angelica Houston, kind of a mobster movie called Prizzi's Honor. Very good. My number 9 is the Paul Rubens adventure, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which is just a delightful movie that I didn't watch until very recently, actually.
Oh, wow.
Or hadn't seen since I was a kid. Probably when it came out. Hadn't seen since then until very recently.
Did you rewatch it in honor of Paul Rubens' death?
I did. I watched all three because there's Pee-wee's Big Adventure and then Big Top Pee-wee and then the Netflix one that had come out just a couple years ago, which I didn't watch when it came out. So yeah, I watched all three when he passed.
I really like the second one, but don't like the third one.
You do like the second one?
Yeah, I mean, I came up on it, but I think it's quirky and fun.
Yeah, the first one I think is obviously far and away the best, and the second one's kind of less good, and the third one I thought was like kind of okay.
Joe Manganiello's funny, I guess.
Yeah. I like him. Number 8 is the Best Picture winner from that year, Meryl Streep and Robert Redford, The Grand Romance Out of Africa. Not for everyone. It's a little bit slow. It's kind of romance. It's a little bit English patient-y. That gives you a frame of reference. Number 7, this feels a little bit low, but you'll see when I have movies that are above it. It's just a pretty good year for movies. Number 7, I have Clue. Number 6, I don't know if you've seen this movie or not, but it's a really kind of wild movie for Scorsese. It's After Hours. Have you seen After Hours?
Yeah, it's number 11 on my list.
11 for you? Okay, cool. Yeah, I really love After Hours. I think it's kind of a different thing for him. I can't remember the actor's name now, but I love the main guy in that. I thought he was really, really good in it.
Griffin Dunn. After Hours is like a lot of people are like, After Hours is actually Scorsese's best movie. I live in New York City and I don't think so, but it's got a really, really fun Terry Garr part. Speaking of Terry Garr, and Catherine O'Hara is so funny in it, but it's just it's funny because I like weird stuff, but this one's a little weird for me.
It might be Scorsese's funniest movie, but yeah. I wouldn't say it's his best by any stretch of the imagination. I just think it's the 6th best movie of 1985 from what I've seen.
Fair enough.
Number 5 is a movie we've talked about before. One of our favorite actors, Philip Baker Hall. It's a movie that only Philip Baker Hall is in. It's called Secret Honor, where Philip Baker Hall just monologues the entire movie as Richard Nixon.
So I don't have that on my list this year because of how Letterboxd does their years.
Yep. So I thought that might happen, but for me, that's in my top 5 there. I love Richard.
Philip Baker Hall.
Why did I say Richard? Oh, because Richard Nixon. Yeah, Philip Baker Hall. Yeah, he's amazing in this. It's just so one guy in a room, and it's compelling as hell. It's just really, really a cool movie.
It's almost an impossible movie because it was directed by Robert Altman, and it seems like it shouldn't be possible for Altman to direct a movie where people aren't talking over each other, but they can't. Right. There's only one person in it.
It's a pretty unique entry in his filmography for sure.
Yeah.
Number 4 is I have the aforementioned Witness, which we've talked about at length. That's my number 4 movie of the year. Very strong. Number 3, I have Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple, which was just remade last year as a musical based, on the Broadway play that they had done. Color Purple also features Danny Glover in a villainous role, so he was just really high on the villainous roles in 1985. I mean, he was just king jerk that year.
Is that the Coleman Domingo role?
Yes. Whoopi Goldberg is amazing in this. Oprah Winfrey was just great in it. A really, really excellent movie. And Spielberg didn't get nominated that year. It's one of the movies, it's got an Oscar, infamous, I guess, in Oscar history. It had 11 nominations, didn't win a single one, and didn't get a nomination for the director. So
very weird.
Sorry, Greta, you're in good company with directors who didn't get nominated. My number 2, I'm assuming this won't be on your list either because of release dates, but it came out in the States in January of 1985. The Coen brothers' debut film, Blood Simple. I've talked about it before. We had a whole podcast about ranking the Coen movies, but I love Blood Simple. M. Emmett Walsh is amazing. Dan Hedaya is amazing. Frances McDormand's amazing. I love Blood Simple. And number 1, no surprise, one of my favorite movies of all time. Just one of the greatest of the decade, Back to the Future. I mean, what do you need to say about Back to the Future? We already talked about Christopher Lloyd and how old he looks and everything, but it's just, for my money, it's a perfect movie. And I've maybe seen it more times than I've seen any other movie. When I used to work at a video store, I always had this Wednesday 9 to 6 shift, and it was a really, really slow video store. And there was almost never any business. So every Wednesday I would watch the trilogy every single Wednesday. And I did this for probably about a year. So I've probably seen the original Back to the Future, at least over 100 times. And I still love it every time.
It's an insane amount of times to have seen a film. So we don't have that much overlap, actually, and a lot of it is because of release date stuff. But so like I mentioned, just because we talked about it in this podcast, Witness is my number 12, After Hours is my number 11. The other movies that have made it onto this list but don't make it quite 10, Cocoon, the movie about old people and aliens, Angel's Egg, which is a very strange Mamoru Oshii movie. It's like an experimental animated film, and then a made-for-TV film in the Hercule Poirot Peter Ustinov series called 13 at Dinner, which is a lot of fun and co-stars Faye Dunaway and Bill Nighy. Good, not great. Yeah, a lot of fun. All right, my number 10 is a movie that is very divisive because it scared the crap out of a lot of people, even though it's a children's movie. But it's Walter Murch's Return to Oz, the sequel to The Wizard of Oz, starring Fairuza Balk. This movie's unhinged, and I like it a lot. It's very strange. It has a lot of cool puppetry. It has a lot of cool stop motion effects for the villain. Yeah, I quite like Return to Oz.
I haven't seen it since I was a kid, so I'd be interested to go back to it.
I think it's cool. My number 9 is an Albert Brooks movie called Lost in America. This whole movie is basically him trying to change his life with his wife, Julie Haggerty, and her gumming up the works because she has OCD, it seems like. It's a very frustrating movie. It's very, very funny. It's the whole movie is basically one extended fight between the two of them. My number 8 is Terry Gilliam's Brazil. Have you seen Brazil?
That's a big hole. Big hole in my never did it.
I talked about Brazil a lot when we first started the show because we reviewed 8.5, and I think there's a lot of overlap between 8.5 and Brazil, and then Beau is Afraid on the other end. Yeah, it's just like I used to have this list, and then I was like, I don't want to keep this list on Letterboxd anymore. Oppressive bureaucracy or fascist bureaucracy, but basically it's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which the enemy is bureaucracy, and the drive to escape it is your need for freedom. It's very good. Jonathan Pryce, and then Robert De Niro has an interesting cameo / he shows up a couple of times doing cool stuff in this movie, including one of the coolest effect shots where De Niro gets covered in paper and then like disappears into nothingness. It's very, very neat. My number 7 is Akira Kurosawa's Ran. This was his late period war epic. I think it is loosely based on a Shakespearean work that King Lear, right? Loosely based on King Lear. I'm not familiar with King Lear, so I couldn't really say. But in a really post-Technicolor era, it's as close to a Technicolor movie as you're going to get, and it's really wild the way he uses color in this movie. My number 6 is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which I also rewatched after Paul Rubens died and totally love, and talked about at work recently because someone was talking about, I asked them if they were ready for a meeting that I was late to, and they were like, I've been ready. I'm like, you've been ready since first call? And they didn't know what I was referring to, but I did. My number 5 is The Goonies. Do you not like The Goonies?
Why do I not have The Goonies on my... maybe I just don't have it marked on Letterboxd, but because I just haven't watched it in a while. But yeah, I love The Goonies. Definitely grew up with The Goonies, yeah.
So The Goonies is my favorite Richard Donner movie. I just think it's so great. It has no weird suicidal stuff like Lethal Weapon. I haven't seen Superman in a very long time, so maybe that's better than I remember. But I just think it's so great about a group of kids who their homes are at risk of being turned into a golf course, and they go on one last great adventure to find treasure, to try to buy off the golf people and try to find pirate treasure. It's incredible. It's a great movie. It's like the ultimate example of what a great teen / preteen movie can be. Not without its, problems. It's a little off color for modern audiences, but I still think it's wonderful.
Yep.
Number 4 is not on your list because of release date stuff, but we've talked about it before. It's Tom Popo. In fact, it even shows up in our 1986 or 1987, actually, I think, episode, but I have it on my list for 1985 because that's when it came out in Japan. So we have an episode coming up next week where we're talking about the movie Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, and it stars Koji Yakusho, who a lot of people know now from being in Perfect Days, but he was the star of Cure, and he plays the man in the white suit in Tom Popo. Yeah. So just a great movie about loving food. My number 3 is Clue. My number 2 is a movie that I almost recommended for you for this year, but then I think we're actually doing it for maybe we're doing it for 1980. Oh no, it came out in America in 1985 too. So no, I guess I just chose Clue for you over it because this one is a tough watch, but you should watch it sometime. It's called Come and See.
Yeah.
So this is about the effect of the Nazi invasion of the USSR. It was a Soviet film, really, but of the Nazi invasion of the USSR and some of the resistance to it, and it is just really, really hard to watch, but very excellently made, really compelling. The makeup in it really makes it, because it's about a young boy who's experiencing this Nazi invasion, and how he looks very like young and sprightly in the beginning, and then by the end of the movie, this young boy looks like he's 100 years old. It's really wild. And then my number one is also Back to the Future. Not much else to say about it. It's iconic for a reason. It's so much fun to watch. It spawned a great trilogy that thankfully has only been spun off into a cartoon show and not, legacy sequels. And I think given this fact that Christopher Lloyd is very, very old and Michael J. Fox is very, very afflicted, I don't think we'll be getting a legacy sequel. At least I've got my fingers crossed that we don't need it.
Yeah, I think there's actually a contractual clause. There's something like Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale have something that's like, you cannot do this as long as we're alive, sort of thing. Like they won't allow it to be done. So like I'm assuming is when Zemeckis and Gale both pass away, then we'll probably get someone will remake it or something.
Well, I can't say I'm thrilled about that, but Bob Zemeckis is not terribly old. He's in his 70s, so there could still be time. There's still time.